Well, welcome everyone to Supporting Teacher Practice Through Coaching and Technology. My name is Colleen Haddad and I'm with the LENA Foundation. LENA stands for Language Environment Analysis, and I've been with the organization for about 1 year, but I've been in the field a little over 25 and have done a little bit of everything. My last work was mostly with the National Accreditation Commission and a lot of QRS.
We need a microphone.
Yeah,
Okay.
we need a mic, or the chat box will blow up on me.
Okay.
And I'm so glad to be here. I've been in Austin a little over 20 years, so I know a lot about the landscape. So welcome, and I apologize for our humid weather today. I'm not quite sure what happened. At least it's warm.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being with us today. My name is Jennifer Malone. I am the Education Services Manager for Nebraska Early Childhood Collaborative out of Omaha, Nebraska, and I'm excited to share our story about our partnership with LENA.
You hold it. I'm gonna go down here.
We can skip 2 slides.
That one?
Yep. So LENA is a national nonprofit on a mission to change children's futures through technology and data-driven programs. And we currently are the global standard for measuring conversational turns and early childhood talk. We have over 400 plus research partners in over 40 countries. But we have 3 programs the one program we'll focus on today, but then we also have 3 programs that we utilize the technology for. LENA Grow, which is our program for professional development and teachers. LENA Start, which is our program that we use with parent work groups or parent groups, and then LENA Home. And to date, we're really close to our 20,000 mark of children served. We had a slow start to the year, but lots of programs have gotten started. And so early language leads to opportunity. We all know this. And so at LENA, we really have focused on the research behind early language as well as ways to do that. And we know that children who are exposed to early interactions early have better school readiness, which then leads to higher levels of vocabulary, which leads to school readiness, 3rd grade reading scores, and then high school, and better life outcomes. Could be.
Sorry.
And so we use our talk pedometer technology. We have a saying that you can't change what you don't measure, and it is like a Fitbit for words. And so the children wear the technology in LENA vests, and then we produce data reports that then show the number of conversational turns between the adult and the child. Since each child wears the vest, the focus is on the language environment of the child and the child's amount of language they're hearing. And so you see it as an aggregate data as a whole for a classroom, as well as individual child data. And then in our home project, our home programs, families do the data for the entire day.
Okay. Oh, wait, I'm in the wrong PowerPoint. I'm so sorry. So we had a little bit of a problem and I was trying to fix it and I messed it up. Bear with me.
That's okay. If the pandemic has taught us one thing, it is technology woes, right? It's going to be fine.
And it is our friend.
Technology flexibility. We are all good.
All right. So, oh, no, I was in the right. So here's my confusion. We just had Nebraska present.
Yes.
So when I saw the NECC logo,
Okay.
I panicked. I think we have it, but if someone from chat wants to chime in and tell me.
This is ours.
Yeah, because it has a
Yes.
LENA at the top.
Okay.
So we're good.
Keep going and I'll see if I hear from somebody in chat.
Okay. I do. Okay. So just a brief overview of NECC and the work that we do. Our mission is to provide resources and guidance for childcare providers and families to ensure that children get the education they deserve. Currently, we are operating under a shared services model. We have an early Head Start childcare partnership grant that allows us to serve 3 early learning centers in the Omaha metro area, totaling just over about 300 children, all ages birth to 3. And we are going to look at data a little bit today, some of our data in connection with the LENA program. So it's just a side note, but important to note that we do go through an annual self-assessment process, community assessment process, to ensure that we are meeting and serving our community's needs as efficiently and intentionally as we possibly can. Aha, it advanced. Yay. Okay. So just a super quick look at the landscape of Nebraska. We do have a lot of parents still working and yet struggling to find that high quality care for their children, therefore leading to turnover, reduced hours, lower income, lower productivity in the workplace, all the things, right? I know that these are challenges that we are facing nationwide, but specifically in Nebraska, we're seeing a shortage of highly qualified educators, especially those birth to 3, shortage of high quality professional development opportunities, staff turnover, lack of the ability to provide competitive compensation for our staff. And of course, the pandemic caused stress and strain for providers, families, children. I'm sure none of this is new news to any of you. Currently, 91% of Nebraska counties do not have enough childcare slots to meet the current demand. Okay, so diving into our topic for today, finding LENA. How did this beautiful partnership emerge? I know that the pandemic has really heightened the conversation around language development in the early childhood classroom. And I think it's actually caused conversations, concerns around the topic. I know it's something we're all very interested in. Our program was actually looking at language development pre-pandemic as well. In 2018, so about 4 years ago, when we were going through our self-assessment process, I'm an education manager, so I look at data all the time, right? And I was looking at like our class scores and our gold scores and our monthly monitoring reports and just everything. Our scores were lower in the language area than I would have liked. And honestly, if you walked into our classrooms, they just felt quiet. And there was talking happening, but it was teacher to teacher interactions. It was child to child, like the children talking to each other. Very short, brief interactions. You know, you'd get those closed-ended questions, the yes and no answers. Feedback was very perfunctory. So it was great job, nice work, that type of thing. So there was talking happening, but it just wasn't those serve and returns, those rich back and forth conversational turns that we want to see. Speaking class specifically, you know, we weren't getting those specific feedback loops, that advanced vocabulary, just all the things that you want to see. It just wasn't there. So I had identified that as an area of growth and a space that we wanted to spend some time. And then lo and behold, a month later, I was at a regional conference and stumbled across a LENA table, and we've just been stuck together ever since. So, but currently so in 2019, we decided to roll it out with the intention of increasing the amount of language experiences that our children were receiving throughout the day. We are actively implementing LENA at 2 of our 3 schools, and we have intentions of expanding to the 3rd school soon. So the first school that we started with is really in maintenance space. Like they've done it, they're doing it, they're great. So we're probably going to do stackables or refreshers with them soon, and then move into our third building. So
I'm going to take over just a little bit and tell you a bit about the brain research behind conversational turns and define conversational turns. So LENA's definition of serve and turn interactions or serve and return interactions is a conversational turn. And that is simply an interaction that either starts with the child with an adult response within 30 to 40 seconds and then a return, that would be one turn. And then when the adult responds again, that would be a third. Or the interaction can start from the child and then go to the adult and then go to the child. And the LENA technology measures turns and vocalizations and word count by not only the pitch and tone, but the syllables and the phonemes. And so it can measure conversation and language in any language. So it's used in languages across the country, and your classrooms can be multilingual as well, and it still will keep an accurate turn count. But this spring, we had some important research come out in 2018, and there were 4 key studies between 2018 and 2019. First was Dr. Romeo and her research team at Harvard and MIT, who confirmed that conversational turns impacted brain function. And her researchers published 2 papers examining how turns related to brain structure as well as brain functioning. And the first paper shed light into the neural mechanisms that form conversational turns and make them so critical. And they identified the relationship between turns and the activation area of Broca's area and the language centers of the brain. And then the second paper really focused on turns and how it strengthens white matter in the brain and formed information highways. And it showed how turns not only stimulated the language center, but were connecting all areas of the brain together to work better together. And then through our own LENA team, our head of research, Dr. Jill Gilkerson, wanted to do a longitudinal study using the LENA technology. And so in the fall of 2018, she was able to produce a 10-year longitudinal study that was published. And it explored how turns in the earliest years of life would predict later child outcomes. And the study did find that the amount of conversational turns experienced, especially between 18 and 24 months of age, had an impact on the child's verbal abilities, language skill, as well as IQ score in middle school. And this crossed not only socioeconomic, but also educational levels of parents. And then a 4th study I'd like to talk about is from Dr. Noble and Dr. Emily Mertz of Teachers College, Columbia University. And they wanted to know if the relationship between family socioeconomic background, as well as brain structure and children's reading skills, and if there was a relationship between turns. And so in 2019, they published an article that found that children with higher levels of conversational turns had greater surface area in the brain, and specifically in the left presylvian cortex. And then they were better at turn taking and reading skills in elementary school. And so what we like to say at LENA is, while words are important, conversational turns are even better. The effect was a 15% higher gain for children with higher conversational turns. So we know that quantity and turn taking is important. And so again, in 2021, we were able to publish our Inside Early Talk report. This report focused on 10,000 children who had experienced the LENA device. And we have some quick takeaways, and I'm going to focus those specifically on childcare. But the first was that 40 conversational turns per hour is the new benchmark. That's where they saw in that 10-year longitudinal study that caregivers that reached that 40 turns, and after that, the IQ score started to level off. That individual program implementations impact individual children's lives and contribute to important research. The most stark finding is that we did see a big difference between home settings and childcare settings as far as the baseline number of turns. And then we're looking at how LENA research can inform policy and practice. And so you can download the Inside Early Talk report from our website. It's a pretty extensive, but I'm going to go over a few of the key findings. Again, the follow-up normative study that I started to discuss started with 329 families. They were census matched for SES from 2 to 48 months, and they had LENA recordings and developmental assessments. And then 146 of those children we were able to find at 9 to 13 years of age, and they had developmental assessments. And it was clear that LENA did have predictive measures of child outcome. And so in middle school, their IQ scores for hourly turns between 18 months and 24 was the most predictive. And again, it leveled off at 40 conversational turns per hour. But it's up to, for every turn, 2 turns per hour, up to 1 IQ score point is what it starts to average out to, up to that 40 turns per hour. And then the rates were even higher when it came to the language IQ score. So I think the green one is full IQ score point, and then the other's the language section, the verbal section. Again, so our stretch goal for childcare programs is 40 turns per hour. A second key finding in the early talk report was that home settings had 73% more conversational turns, and here 28% more adult words. And this is partly because in childcare settings, they're talking to each other. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it should be the same, because the device does not count child turns between each one another. Those are counted as child vocalizations. But it does mean there's still a stark difference between a home environment and a childcare environment. And so this is the report for that. So in the home is the green. And so typically at baseline, homes are starting out between 25 and 28 turns per hour, and can go up to the benchmark, and or their benchmarks were between 2 and 11 months, and then it kind of goes across age. And then the orange line is the family childcare settings. This is a little bit of a less of the group, because we started out in group center-based care. And so that's some of the discrepancy between their average turn counts. And these are turn counts at baseline, not after doing LENA programs. And then the blue is childcare settings. And I think the most stark one is between 12 months and 24 months is when we find that the turn count for childcare centers are the least, and it's where children tend to benefit the most from high turns. So especially during the beginning of the LENA Grow program, the focus was on infant and toddler programs, and our materials are very focused on infant toddlers, but we have found that it works through preschool age group. And then another key finding in the early talk report was that even in the highest talk settings of childcare settings, is that there are still about 20% of children who are experiencing what we call language isolation, meaning that they are hearing less than 15 turns per hour and as few as 0 to 5 turns per hour. And 2/3 of children experience the fewer than 15 turns per hour. And that in some settings, only as high as 6% are experiencing 40 turns or more per hour. And this is at baseline again. And then we have a saying at LENA that you can't change what we don't measure. And so there was a study done specifically with adults wearing the devices and showing how adults very much overestimate how much they're talking and how much they're talking to children. And those of us who think we talk the most actually are talking the least. And so the green line is the one that was the full match of estimation of word count. And then, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about LENA Grow and then turn it back over to Jennifer. But what is LENA Grow? So we are a professional development program that is practice-based and job embedded. It is flexible. It uses the LENA technology to measure talk, and then provides data to feedback to the classrooms. So what does a LENA week look like? So there's one LENA recording per week. And so you may do that recording any day of the week. We typically recommend Tuesday through Thursday, just because it tends to be the most typical. Then the data is uploaded into the computer and then uploaded into the cloud. The device does not transmit. It uses the same technology as a hearing aid as far as the battery technology. And so it's safe for use with children. But it does have to be attached to a computer before any of the information is left off. And then no one can ever listen to the recording, and the device is immediately erased as soon as the data is uploaded into the computer. And then we have lots of complex logarithms that aggregate the report. And for the coaches, they are able to print out the classroom data for that LENA day. It does an hourly report as well as a full day summary. And then we do practice-based, strengths-based coaching. We recommend, except for the first session, that they're about 30-minute sessions. And we have some very specific open-ended questions we start with, and then some guided materials. And we use our 14 talking tips as the key for that practice. And so we know the 14 talking tips are research-based, simple practices for both caregivers. We use the same talking tips for our parent-facing programs as well as our teacher programs. And so we do have a full family engagement toolkit that the teachers can use and send home for parent resources. They're simple, accessible behaviors. We want them to use them while they're doing their day. But the 3 key things is that they create joy and attention, they do increase turn taking, and they create recasting for children. And I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to talk more about their program.
Does anybody have any questions?
And I was going to say, but I guess I'll pause for
Okay.
questions.
No. Or sharing anything in the chat?
Thanks.
Logistically, Colleen kind of talked about like what a LENA week looks like. And at our program, we do our LENA days on Tuesdays. So each classroom has a bucket and the devices for the children are in that bucket with the little vests. The vests are adorable. Some of our little cuties look like Winnie the Pooh. They like, and so the vests are in there, the devices, and we really do call them devices because they're not really recording. And like, we got a lot of this, again, side note, we got a lot of questions from parents when we first started about privacy. And the way that it was best explained to us and the way that we explained to them is that if you were in a restaurant and there was a family sitting next to you that spoke a different language, you could clearly tell that language turns were happening, but you wouldn't be able to know what was being said. And the device works similarly. So we do call it a device and not a recorder, and have those conversations with parents. And and it just, because we do get parent consent, they do consent to the program, but that helps a lot. So anyway, each classroom has a bucket. Our coaches deliver buckets on Monday night so that on Tuesday morning, the minute that first child is dropped off, they can put their vest on, slide the device in, you just push start and it tracks all day long. They can wear it during water play. They've been thrown up on. It's fun. We wash them every week. So they can wear it sleeping. Most of our children do nap with them on. If it causes a problem at nap time, they can take it off. And as long as it's just laying right next to their mat, it still tracks what we need. And then they just have to put it back on after nap time. But they wear it until the end of the day and then they just take it off. They don't even have to turn it off. It can tell when turns aren't happening and it just shuts off on its own. So it's really like, when we started, teachers had a lot of questions too, right? Of course, but it's honestly really easy. So they just take it off, put it in the bucket, and then coaches come pick up the next morning and we take it up to our offices. And Coach Holly, which you'll see her here in a little bit, she literally has cords. It's like LENA Hub is what we call it because she plugs everything in and they charge and they upload on Wednesdays. We print data reports. And then on Thursdays are coaching sessions. And we did them via Zoom over the pandemic. So it's workable. And then on Fridays and Mondays, we set aside time. Sometimes teachers will say things like, well, I need to see what that looks like, or can you come kind of show me or just role play with me, walk me through it. And so we set aside Fridays and Mondays for that. And then it's just back to it. So it's really very easy. We do that for 11 weeks, but that's a typical LENA week logistically. Yeah. Yeah.
Mike, the question said that our virtual audience can hear.
A question about the home percentage being so much higher. Was there any insight as to why? My initial assumption was child to ratios, or were there any more information as to why that was the case?
So our insight is that it is measuring all adult language in the home. And so typically it may be 1 or 2 parents or caregivers and frequently more. So we do think that that's part of it. We also think that there's relationships involved. And so that and parents do volunteer for the program. So they've signed up to measure their conversations. So And we do see that in settings with family childcare where the settings are smaller and ratios are lower, that the talk starts out higher. And then I think the other is that oftentimes families, it's their first child or they don't have other children that are speaking to the children. And so in settings, we know that children talk to one another. And so you can see that in the report, the children's vocalizations will be a little bit higher on the report because you see it hour by hour. But we are investigating ratios and we come out with new reports all the time.
These microphones. Okay, well, the one has now died. And so here we go. We're going to do it. So why, Lena? Why did our program go? Oh, did you have another question? Yeah.
Of your question, relationships at home. And then, so are you seeing, are you seeing staff being more effective over time as the relationships?
Yeah, I think.
So, hold on one second. So we lost the wireless mic. So if you guys would just sort of repeat the essence of the question so that the home viewers can hear what the question was.
Sure.
And then your response.
I hope I ask it again so that I can make sure I do it justice.
Are you seeing
Relationships.
With relationships growing over time, are you seeing the data that you get from your LENA week?
Sure. So as relationships build in a classroom over time, is the data reflecting that? Yes. And the simple answer is yes. We've got, like I said, I've got data to show you today. I think so. And the beauty of the device is that it gives you that live data on the frequency, but your ticket is that coaching piece, right? And so the coaching on the quality of the interactions as well is really where we're seeing the difference being made. And yes, we are seeing our data is clearly showing that it's working. So great question. Okay. So back into this, why LENA? We ultimately as a program chose LENA for two main reasons: the actionable data that it gives you, and then the ease of implementation. The talking tips are wonderful. They are super easy, simple, practical strategies that you can implement into your day like right away. So teachers, even parents, we've been working with parents on these. Anyone from your greenest teacher to your most seasoned teachers can do this work. The data reports are easy to read, then provide information to the coaches to be intentional with their coaching. We've also individualized for teachers and kiddos with the data reports that we get. So I have a couple examples for you. A teacher burnout is a thing right now too, right? And so the last thing we want to do is add anything to someone's plate. LENA's beautiful in the sense that you can just kind of slide it into what you're already doing. So the teachers in our program get coaching from an education coach on a frequent basis, on a scheduled, they have a scheduled plan. One of our teachers was already working with her coach on offering simple challenges at outdoor time. She was like, I just feel like it's crazy, like it's madness. They're running around like there's nothing happening, right? And so we kind of worked with her on like, okay, well, let's bring out some bean bags. Maybe you can do beanbag toss or do some hopscotch over here, like draw a little road for cars. She was already working on that with her coach. And so we just slid LENA into it. So if a child comes and says, hey, Miss Jen, will you do bean bags with me? What talking tips can you do during that interaction, right? Or how can we embed this into it? And since the talking tips are so practical, it's been really easy to do that. We've also used the talking tips for our verified kids. So we have approximately 30 children at our program right now that are verified with a disability or a learning delay. A handful of those are speech and language delays. Like we have a good amount of those. And we read through IFSPs with teachers, right? Talk about the goals, talk about how are we going to get this into our lesson plans? How is this going to look in their daily experiences here at school? We use the talking tips a lot, like a lot. And I have some data on that for you a little later too. So we've been able to individualize in more ways than one, and it's been pretty easy to do so. And then, oh, sorry, we're a slide ahead.
I just moved it just now.
Oh, I'm still back on my other slide, but that's okay. So pandemic implementation, we were able to keep LENA alive during the pandemic too. So we were closed for a good amount of time, an extended amount of time. So we weren't able to do the full 11-week course, but we still talked with teachers, practiced the talking tips, did lots of role play. We put talking tips into the weekly lesson plans that went home. So we were able to keep it going as best as we could. And then it was really fun because when we came back, we had a lot of teachers, they were like, when are we starting LENA? So it's just, they've been loving it. Okay, so I mentioned data about 4 years ago when we looked at our data, when all this came up, right? Class specifically, and looking at that language development section, collectively as a program, we averaged about a 4.6. And our benchmark of quality personally is a 5 or above. We want to be there. So we were lower than we would have wanted to be. Gold, again, language development objectives specifically, about 72% of our kiddos were meeting or exceeding the expectation at that time. Our benchmark of quality is 85%. So we looked at other things as well, but anytime we have 2 or more data points below a standard of quality, it's a space we're going to spend some energy and talk about improvement, right? So again, that's just kind of our why. This is on the next slide when we get there, when the computer works with us here. It's going to show you an example of a room summary report. So these are the reports that the coaches print and take to the teachers every week on Thursdays that they look at.
Sorry, let's put the cursor on here. This is very frustrating. Hit that. There we go. That one?
Okay, yes, please. This is the reports that get printed out. So again, very easy to read and use. This is a room summary report. So this is what the coaches print out on Wednesdays and take to their coaching sessions on Thursdays. It's going to show you just average conversational turns per hour for that classroom. It shows you turns broken down by the hour, which is really fun. So you can focus on times of day. If you'd like, we actually had one teacher, she said, why do I have nothing in the 11 o'clock space? And I was like, well, girl, it's lunch. You're probably eating. You're probably tired. It's been a busy morning. So she just really focused on like getting some of those talking tips when she was sitting at the table with the kids at lunchtime. How can I incorporate those talking tips, right? So it's just been really fun to have them branch out and think about language development in lots of different ways. But you can see a clear increase from LENA day 1 on the left to LENA day number 7 on the right. We went from 25 average conversational turns up to 31 or 34, I'm sorry. And then we had an increase at the 9 o'clock hour, and also 4 out of our 7 kiddos saw an increase in the conversational turns that they were receiving during the day. Do you have anything you want to add for that one?
Well, just a point is
And
that
a question. There's a question in the chat.
Well, it's actually an observation. I'm trying to talk loud, but my observation is it feels a little bit like a Fitbit. You know how a Fitbit
Yeah.
tells you how
It's 100% what it is.
people go, oh, I have to get more steps in. It sounds exactly like that.
It really is. And we're like, you know how you need an exercise coach to like power you through it and really get like the full results you need? Like that's us. We're the coaching. Like you have the coaching. That's what I was mentioning before is this gives you all the amazing data, but then you have your coaches support that data so that you see those actionable strategies taking place in the classroom and that quality. And that's where you get that return on the data. So, okay. Oh, you're fine. Yes, we're getting to that. We've got
so her
individual
question
child
was,
reports.
does it do individual reports? And so we do have individual child reports so the teacher can dive deeper. If you're doing it virtually or if you have your computer with you, literally clicking on the 18 would then show that child. So it does link to it. But you also can have the reports printed. So I do virtual coaching with some providers in Washington, D.C., and I'm based in Austin. But so it's pretty flexible there. Some other things to point out are we do give stars. So they get a star on the report for reaching a goal. So a minimum of 25 turns on average automatically receives a star, or an increase in turns, as well as for an interactive day. So that's what the star is on the interactive day. And that's when a child has 5 or more hours of interactive talk during the day. It's not uncommon though. So for the 2 children that had a less interactive day, maybe they slept longer at nap time, maybe they came in early. We now require a request that program shut off the device, but that's somewhat new as children leave, because it does automatically shut off, but sometimes it records background noise, or it skews the data a little bit. So we're making Grow 3.0 is coming out very soon. And we're making some changes based on a lot of feedback, including Jennifer's star coaches feedback. And then the other thing is in week 7, they can see their previous LENA weeks to see how things change. And again, it measures it as a teaching team. So there may have been changes in the team, or just changes in routine or day. Any other questions? Yes. So she asked if the 11 weeks is consecutive. So currently it's 10 weeks of coaching, and we have a baseline day and a LENA day 2 for the first week. And then in our Grow 3.0, we have found that because of COVID and looking at our research, that about 86% of the increase in turns takes place in the first 5 recordings. And so we're going to do stackable sequences. And so it'll be 2 sets of 5-week sequences. And we've changed the curriculum a little bit, but updated it to include some more preschool information, literacy, and math and science. But that's a great piece about data, is we can kind of pivot those. But we do see that there is still significant increase over time with the 10 weeks, because they're really doing the reflective feedback cycle as well as building habit.
Yes, and there's LENA provides a nice roadmap. So you know what your focus is each week. So it's like, this week, we're going to really bring in the talking tips and the language strategies to diapering. And then maybe the next week is book time. And then the next week is hand washing. So you can kind of focus. And of course you can, I think, be flexible and make it work for you. Kind of like the example I was sharing with the outdoor time. She still did the hand washing that week, but she was like, can I also do it outside? Like, can we just yeah, of course. So they do provide a nice structure to make sure that you're, have that fidelity to the program. And you can just kind of learn one little nice transition or routine each week. Yay. And we have a picture of that individual child report coming up soon. So, okay. So there was one day I grabbed some of my coaches and I said, go out and grab a couple of teachers and just ask them like what they love about LENA. I don't care. Like they can talk about the LENA reports, LENA coaching. So they are very authentic videos for that reason. And I hope you appreciate that. Miss Carissa on the left is at our Kennedy school, and she's a newer teacher, probably been with us 3 or 4 years. Miss Katya and Miss Nadia on the right-hand side over here are at our Gateway School, and they have been teaching in early childhood for a very long time, but they have been teaching together for a very long time. Like I want to say 10, 15 years. So they're like early childhood unicorns. They're amazing. They're all amazing. And what I'm hoping that this slide showcases is really showcasing LENA's ability to span a wide range of educational experience levels, skill levels, abilities. Like you really can do it with your greenest teachers on up to your seasoned veteran teachers. So. There are parent reports that we can send home, and they're amazing. They're in English and in Spanish. But We also saw that as an outcome of the program is teachers were talking with families more about what was happening throughout the day, and they had data to use. And so they really felt confident to have those conversations. It was wonderful. She said we were more intentional about what she's her. Can we play that one more time so we can hear Katya?
I enjoyed the LENA reports because they not only helped me realize how much each child was being talked to, but also shared with parents how much the children were being talked to. It helps them like, oh wow, my child is talking a lot at school, or we would get to tell them, like, oh, they were really quiet today, if their clock was really low, or they would get to see it and be like, wow, so my child does get talked to throughout the day. I really like that how we focus on me. We went outside. We were more intentional about like having conversations with the kids, so they're supposed to go back to What I think about LENA was that it showed us like areas we needed to improve on to work on the language, and we noticed that sometimes the language needed to focus a little bit more on language or the parents as well.
They're my team that did the outside goal. So, any questions about that? So then I also asked the lovely women that I get to work with every day, the education coaches, how LENA has helped them and impacted their coaching. And they just kind of mentioned it provides a nice outline, that roadmap and structure where they can reflect on the data and they get to celebrate those moments of success. Guides them to help teachers utilize data to make informed decisions about their teaching practices, intentionally supports their coaching of teachers to implement language strategies in the classroom, and then gives them research to share with the teachers about the importance of those caregiver and child interactions. And then this is Coach Holly off on the right.
LENA coaching gave me the opportunity to show my teachers real life data from the classrooms and talk to them about conversational terms and ways to increase language skills with their children.
If you ever come to Nebraska, come see me on a Thursday. Holly will be buried in LENA cords. she's our person. She's amazing. Okay, so this is an example of a whole classroom celebration report and then an individual child report. I'll let you start and then I can share.
So after the final 11 LENA recordings, you can create a celebration report, which shows the number of stars they earned for conversational turns, the number of stars they had for interactive days, as well as the total adult word count. Now, remember, this is for the 11-week program, but just one LENA day recording a week. And then the total number of conversational turns. And then we give specific data on the side of like how many children are experiencing 15 turns or more, and some of the stretch goals. And then with the individual child reports, the nice part is, we don't necessarily recommend just sending this report home to parents. We have a more simplified report, but you can use these in parent-teacher conferences or with IEPs, or if you do have a child that has some specific language delays, they can share it. At the blue is the number of adult word count on average that child hears, and the device does that by distance, and we have loud words versus more quiet so that it averages it for the child. And then the middle, the yellow bars, is the number of conversational turns. And then the last is the child vocalizations. And it does measure babbles, coos, and gurgles. It does not measure digestive noises or cries. And so sometimes in the infant classroom, if it's stranger anxiety or maybe they have a substitute teacher, you'll see a change in number of vocalizations or maybe even word count there, just because of the day. But this allows the teacher really to look at the child's day per hour, especially if you have some that are longer nappers. Their clock may not look as interactive because, of course, they're not supposed to be talking during nap time. You can also see when they're most vocal during the day, and not everybody's chart looks the same. With my family talk care providers I'm coaching, there are some kids that are super talkative between 7 and 9, and you can see it on their chart, and then others that don't talk until after nap. And so it's the caregiver really can do some strategies to work at the times in which the children are more interactive, or maybe pick out how to get them to be more interactive at other times. Any questions on these reports? And then I'm going to let Jennifer go.
Well, and just on this slide here a little bit, we really use the celebration reports to just share overall success with teachers. They love it. Like, they think it's super encouraging to see that they had, I mean, look at that. That's crazy, right? 613,000. So they love that. For the individual child reports, we focus a lot on the kiddos that are getting those lower amounts of conversational turns. Those are really great for opening teachers' eyes to potential blind spots, like maybe a time of day or a certain child, whatever the case may be. But it's really impactful these to prepare teachers to have parent conferences and have those conversations with families as well. So I'd mentioned earlier about our verified kiddos with those language delays, right? I took some data. This is a kiddo at our Kennedy location. He is verified with a speech and language delay. One of his goals, it's expressive language, right? Like, we've been working with him on just trying to simple phrases, even sign language gestures, express his needs and wants, anything, just to talk more. So we'll use those individual child reports to measure that as well. And we take that information to IFSP meetings, and it's just so powerful. But so LENA Day here on the left, September 28th, he had 68 vocalizations, and that had increased to 80 vocalizations by the end of November. So in 60 days, we saw a nice improvement for that little guy. And it like literally gives me goosebumps talking about it. So it's just, and then being able to share that kind of information with families, like, how supportive does that feel? And it's confidence boosting. And there's just so much that goes into that for him and the teacher and the family. And it's usable data that we can take to his next IFSP meeting and be like, look at all of this that's happening. Look at this progress. Let's talk next steps. Right. So it's great. Oh, yeah. And this is our most recent celebration report. I believe this is program, right? Like, this is a program. So everybody, so we have celebration reports by classroom, but this is our most recent program celebration report.
And it actually goes from 2019 all the way to 2021.
Yeah.
So
So
I try
this
to do
is
like
total.
all of they've done it multiple LENA sequences. So
Yeah.
the nice part about the overall celebration reports is you can dive deep into program level. So if you're serving multiple sites or multiple programs, to see where your increases are. And then the LENA data team can also pull out some equity reports. And we do see that the lowest third of talk children make the most significant gains. And you can share that data at a program level. We don't share it with individual level, but so for instance, for Nebraska Early Learning Coalition as a whole, that information can be shared.
Yeah, I use this a lot for like stakeholders and policy council, our board, funders, quarterly data reports and things like that.
And so, as I just mentioned, one thing we have really paid attention to is having equitable interaction. And on average, children who enter the program experiencing the least amount of talk gain the most turns, and it ranges depending on where they are between 58% and all the way up to 75% of gains by the end of the program. And then another focus on equity, this is a report we can pull for you, is the first chart was all of their centers, participants at baseline for all children made a 9% gain, but the second chart shows the lowest conversational turns. So in their program, the lower talk children made a 67% gain. Another thing that we find is that 93% of Lean and Grow teachers feel more confident, and 87 have greater job satisfaction. A big focus on the program is the important that every single word and every conversation they have with children is building brains, and that every diaper change, every meal time, every time you're doing that and having this back and forth turn. So I think that's one of this. And then this is not an assessment tool. This is a strengths-based professional development program used to improve the language environment for children. So we really have that focus. Now it can be tied to other things, but we really want that teacher gains there. So I'm going to let Jennifer talk about how it does relate to assessment tools.
Yeah, it really does. It's nice because it's like, oh, you're fine. Every diaper change matters, right? Every second matters. And again, going back to that ease of implementation, it's why I love LENA, because it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be super difficult. It's tiny little things that you can just squeeze into your day that make a big difference. So return on investment, looking at that data, right? So just program-wide, comparing our most recent class scores with national averages. In that emotional and behavioral support section, national average is a 5.3. We were at a 6.6. And then engaged support for learning national average is a 3.6, and we were at a 4.7. So we are seeing the difference in our data.
When did you do your class?
Our most recent one was in the fall of, I've lost all track of time. What is it right now? It's 2022, 2021. Yeah.
So that's the pandemic.
Yeah. And then language modeling. So that language domain, right? Specifically looking at that, I shared we were at a 4.6 4 years ago. We've increased that to 4.71. So still not at our benchmark of quality of the 5, but we're getting there. And I feel like pandemic considering, I'm okay with that. Like we're going in the right direction. So we're just going to keep it going. And then for gold, that language development, those objectives that go specifically into language development, 72% of our kiddos 4 years ago were meeting or exceeding the expectation. Thank you. Up to 79%. So we are seeing it make a difference. We are making improvements, and even through hard times. If you can go to the next slide for me. So we have continued our investment, and will likely continue to do so, because we're seeing improvements in caregiver and child relationships and interactions. We're seeing an increase in our class scores, an increase in our gold scores. Something else to note. So social emotional 4 years ago, 72% of our kids were meeting or exceeding the expectation, and that has gone up to 88%. We do implement conscious discipline with fidelity. So I think the two programs, right, together, the LENA, the conscious discipline, has really made a big difference there. But as we've seen an increase in language development and also an increase in social emotional skills, challenging behaviors are coming down. Things are really feeling calmer and just more engaging in a lovely way. I think, honestly, one of my favorite things is when you walk into a room now, teachers are talking with children instead of at them or around them. And that is like, makes it all worth it for me. So, yeah, I think you're stuck with us.
So one of the things we have found is that although children are at the center, is that providers and teachers do benefit from Lean or Grow, especially new providers, as well as teachers who've been in the program a long time. That coaches, and I will take this, I've been in the field a long time, and I've taught college courses and done a lot of adult learning. But this is the first time I had the opportunity to coach LENA with family child care providers, and you grow a lot. You ask really good questions, and I've never seen their programs. I just know what I know from Capital Quality and what I know from their licensing reports. And so you learn to not make assumptions and really help them form. So you want to increase talk with Johnny. What does that look like for you? What talking tip do you feel like would work for Johnny, or what talking tip do you feel like maybe you're not implementing right now? And how do you look at that? And then the teacher's empowered to say, well, this will work for me. And then having them write down that goal and me the next week repeating it to them. And what did that look like for you? And they will give you both challenges and successes. And so a lot of the ownership. So I have been very lucky. I am the only LENA person that has been coaching because we have special projects is in my title. So I feel very lucky to get to coach, but it's an interesting. And then from a policy and state level, we started out as a research foundation. The SP was the first tool. And so really impacting state policy level and looking at the importance of conversational turns. The research project I'm doing in DC is looking at pre-post DECA ratings for social emotional development and growth. We have evaluation studies in 3 states going on right now, as well as we have a great webinar right now that's called Do COVID Babies Talk Less? And sadly, the research is saying, yes, COVID babies do. And so I would encourage you to watch our recorded webinar on that. We do see an increase in equity. Teachers recognize maybe the quiet child in their classroom is very self-contained, but maybe not getting as much attention. Also, when home language and teacher language is different, maybe they're not making as much effort. And so there's that. And then we have seen pretty consistently a 1-point increase, especially in instructional support and class scores. And again, pre-pandemic, we had lots of research going, and then we still have some, but now we're back up and running in classrooms. So we should have that. And then job satisfaction. And so what is the common bond to all of these crazy things that we learn about is interaction. So you cannot find a tool in any QRS or licensing guidelines or curriculum or child screenings or assessments. And so one of the things about LENA is it really can support all the other things you're doing without changing. So they can be Montessori, or they can be using CORE, or they can be using TS Gold, and this will support, and the coach can use this as a launching point for other tools that you're using. And then I think I have about 3 minutes, not maybe. Oh, do I have time? Okay, so we have time for questions. Oh, 12:50.
Everybody's brains up.
Yeah,
That's okay.
Oh, great. So do you guys have questions? And then I can share some more information. Okay.
I just noticed the last slide talked about the curriculum. Can you tell me what curriculum you are?
Yes, I sure can. So for our people on Zoom, the question was that it can implement into any curriculum. What curriculum do we use? We use Creative Curriculum and TSG as our child assessment tool. Mm-hmm.
We have an online question.
Great.
What are some ways organizations fund LENA?
So you want to talk about yours and then I'll move on?
We were fortunate. The timing landed almost per. Oh, okay. What are some ways that organizations fund the LENA program? We were fortunate. We were writing a new grant. Timing just like was on our side. We were writing a new grant and wrote it in. And then when the grant was approved, we had the funding to get started. That was at our Kennedy location. So yeah, timing was on our side, but then we had wonderful results and we were able to share that. And so we, I think we partnered with y'all to do some different things. We had some incentivized and given to us, and then we were able to, persuade's not the word I want, but we were able to present our case to get the additional funding needed to get enough materials to do the second school. Yes.
So the question was private philanthropy. So there are multiple ways that LENA will work with you for funding. We are a nonprofit organization and have a great philanthropy team. We do have launch funds available in many times periods per year. And I believe there are still launch funds available currently, which help with the initial cost of the devices and the program setup. We do require that a contract has 10 or more classrooms. And so it's typically a multi-site program may be able to do it, but usually larger organizations implement LENA. We have a lot of Head Start programs, many um, uh, in Texas, the Texas Workforce Commissions lead it, Child Care Services Group, Patch in Hawaii. It uses LENA. So different organizations, resource and referral. There are opportunities sometimes with your Harper funding or your block grant funds within their quality sectors to utilize those as well for matching funding. And then again, we'll help look at local funders in the area and work with you and your philanthropy team to kind of see how funds can get put together. The University of Memphis started with one small grant, and now
there might be a lot of universities interested in the data behind this, especially with language development being a big thing right now after COVID. So I think.
Yeah. And so they've partnered with
Mhm.
philanthropy, and they're doing it. We have a large Providence Talks, and then Birmingham Talks, like Foundation. For our START program, libraries are a great partner, United Way, Easter Seals. And so we really, we have a great partnerships tool as how to look at partner organizations and then really looking at the infrastructure of your own programs. One thing that I think is looking at your own infrastructure for coaching. And it does take some coaching capacity, but you also can look at the coaching capacity of the programs that you serve and looking at serving programs at a variety of levels that way.
And it really is just that initial investment. Once you get over that hurdle, it's pretty easy to maintain cost-wise. The only thing we really do each year is inventory vests and kind of go through like the kiddos we're going to have, the ages, the sizes we're going to need. And then of course the thrown up ones need to be thrown away. So those have to be replaced. Some of them, they're very sturdy. They do hold up pretty well. But we do have a few that, it's just like, we need to get rid of this one. And so it's really just re-inventorying and placing an order for new vests each year. That's the only cost that's continual I can think of after that initial investment.
Yeah. And then there's just an annual affiliate fee, which is $1,000 per year. And then you pay per classroom. And then in our LENA Grow 3, the stackable sequence, the classroom has access, or that center, each classroom will have a full year and they can do as many sequences as they'd like within that year. And so it allows a little bit more flexibility. So there may be some programs that have turnover, and so they need to start again and do 2 foundations. It may be that you have a program that was doing really well and you need to spread your resources. So you do a lot of 5-week sequences versus doing the full 10 weeks to make sure that all children are kind of getting access. And so we have a great partnerships team that will help work with you in your specific circumstances and link people together.
Does LENA download the data? Do you all see the data that's collected, and do you create reports and do you help interpret? What's the relationship once you have the hardware? What's the software relationship?
So you'll have access to LENA online, and I'll let you tell a little bit about how you use it, and then I'll tell how others.
I feel like I can't decide if I want to stand or sit. We get all of our data online, right? But our LENA representative, we have like a consultant that we check in with once a month. She can see everything too. There are times when we'll say, can you pull the equity report for us? Can you pull our celebration report for us? They do it super quick. But most of the stuff we can get on our own. But yeah, we do. It is shareable. We do have a person we check in with monthly if we've got questions or as things come up.
Yeah. So each partner's assigned an implementation specialist, and they're with you for the year. Contracts are 1 year. And when you first start, the implementation specialists meet with you every other week on a biweekly basis to get you launched. And then after that, it's monthly. And with larger partners, you can invite as many coaches. And so we have some that are a little bit smaller, like are only doing 2 sites, but we have others like in Workforce Capital area. We have TRS is kind of overseeing it, and then the individual sites will be coaching. So all coaches are invited to those implementation meetings, but only the coach for the school can see their data, and workforce can see data for all of their programs. So it is leveled data. And then we do follow high security practices and meet the 3 different agencies that require security. We do, you can either do an opt-out consent or an opt-in consent, but we do recommend that you get consent since you are doing recording. But again, nobody can ever listen to it, including the logarithm. It's lots of feedback that you do get more detailed reports if you want, so you can see if there's electronic noise in the background, if there's lots of loud vocalizations that's impacting turns, like a room like this in a childcare setting would probably not get very clear speech. So there are some reports available to you to see maybe why turns or counts aren't increasing in programs that maybe have half walls. We've seen some challenging situations. And so not only do we coach on how to do interactions, but maybe how to make that environment better for what children are hearing, because the device is rated to where the child's mouth is to where the vest is. We know the distances, and we know that children process speech at 1/5 the speed adults do, and that they need clear speech for learning. We have found that the masks, we are getting just as good of impact. Do you guys wear masks?
We do.
And so the data, teachers do still need to speak with intentionality, and they may notice some differences. But the coaches I'm doing in DC, both the children and coaches are wearing masks. Other questions?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our program, since we're early Head Start, we have to have coaches on staff. So NECC has 6 education coaches that provide the services at the early learning centers. They have a caseload. So they have about 6 to 8 classrooms per person. And LENA is one of the things that, amongst all the other things that they do in those classrooms. It might look different in other.
And so each partner will provide their own coaching staff. LENA, the coach training is about 2 hours on their own, virtual coaching, and then 2-hour sessions. We don't have specific requirements. We depend on the partner agency to choose their coaches. And so we have peer coaching models. We have literacy coaches sometimes. So there's many different coaching models. The organization that partners and the lead organization can have as many coaches go through coach training. You do the supervision, and they're welcome to attend the implementation specialist meetings. But unless they're having a specific data upload challenge or something, you kind of mentor those coaches, and they attend the IS meetings. And so like Nebraska, the coaches may only attend some of the implementation meetings, maybe not the beginning session. And so it really depends on the partner organization, and we do work hand in hand. So you're not given the tools and said run. And then with the Grow 3.0, all coaches will go through the Grow 3.0 training. And of course, that's included. There's not a fee for coaches. And we do provide a coach certification program. So if you need to use it for your training registry, and they get training hours for that. And there's also a teacher certification. So some people forget that this is really, truly training. So it is a professional development system. And I am doing alignments with many of the state professional development systems. I just got TAP approval in OSSI for LENA for their training registry. But currently the 10-week sequence is technically 5 hours of CDA area number 8. But if you do longer coaching sessions, or you can kind of document your own training. And then as we move into the Grow 3.0, it'll be 2 sections, a 5-hour certificate, and then a 7-hour a 4-hour and a 3-hour. So it comes out to 7 total hours, because we really want it to be with fidelity for us. So if you do an hour-long coaching session, typically the LENA part of it's only about 30 minutes. And we do have handouts and posters and a teacher guide that they can kind of look at. Other questions?
I'm curious, are you talking to each other at centers like our teacher or other are they talking to each other about what they're seeing in the students?
Yes, I actually had one of the teachers from the school that we're not doing it at yet email me and say, the other two schools are saying all these wonderful things. Like, why are we not doing it? And I said, it's a time. That school is having the most just struggles with staffing. And it's like, if we're going to do it, we want to do it well. And there's just a lot. There is a lot, I would say, on the front end when you're gearing up to do LENA for the first time, and you really want to give that the time that it deserves and needs and do that well. And we just need them to be a little more settled, but they talk about it all the time. And they're like, we always tell them it's not a competition, but I think they think it is sometimes. Like, they're like, how many turns did you get today? They do. Yeah, it has a really positive feel in our program. They love doing it. And I think it's just really built their confidence. So,
And just to repeat the question again, it was about if teachers feel if they discuss it amongst themselves when they're in programs. And I think again, we look at it as strengths-based approach, but especially an infant classroom looks very different than a toddler classroom, and the ratios change. And so I think as long as the coach is doing it from a strengths-based perspective, they get a lot of insight from one another and practices. And so we've seen it really build teams, and the peer coaching model has been very successful in communities that don't have as much coaching infrastructure. Our Birmingham Talks program, they got a large amount of funding and then are looking for people to participate. So they've used some really different models and have had some great success with that. Yes.
yeah, that's a fair question. I might, because that's a technology, because that's the device itself, right?
So we'll do a little both, but
Okay.
her question was, how does LENA address teachers who maybe aren't having as rich of conversations or just chatting with over or not with? And so I think from the technology standpoint, it can't tell them exactly that, but looking at the reports, they can start to make those relationships. One of the things that we know is that turns are less when teachers are not pausing. So the word count will be really high, but turns will be low, or child vocalizations will be really high and turns will be low, and maybe adult word count. And so we really look to the coach to do some of those strategies. But going back to the talking tips, like for myself, wait for a response or wait for their response. I think about that frequently is, did I pause long enough? And then that's where that extra time and using other things, other models like pyramid model, you can kind of pull some of those resources in. But I think how I'm using it is because I'm not seeing what they're doing, and they're have ERS scores in DC, is I'll ask questions like, well, how did that change from this week to this week? What did you do differently? And they're having those light bulb moments. Well, I'm instead of giving directions when it's cleanup time, I go and talk to each child individually and, say it's going to be time do you want to clean up with your blocks or your cars? And so they'll make those connections. So I think some of it is that. So I think there's a little bit more freedom for the teacher to have to think about it because the data doesn't give them that answer. And so it kind of And I've become a much better asker of questions instead trying to give the answers, because then they would say, oh no, that's not the reason. When I'd be like, well, I think this is happening. And they're like, no, that's not what's happening.
No, that's great. I really do think it just comes back to looking at the reports together and the coaching on that quality. We've had on that individual child report, if the adult vocalizations are like through the roof and the child vocalizations are like this, you can say, so we're clearly not pausing and giving children a moment to speak and have that return interaction. And so when that comes up, we just say, I get it, but the goal here is to have quality back and forth interactions. And so how is that going to look for you in your classroom next week? So the coaching is really that key ticket. Yeah.
It also looks to me like this is a really accessible way to start moving into reflective practice, right? What you just described is the teacher needing to think about, what did I do different? And that's where we want to go.
Yes, we actually specifically designed our LENA weeks to drop off reports and then do coaching the next day so that teachers can look at their reports, process it themselves, and then our coaches will go in and say, tell me one thing you noticed. And it's really, we are trying to build that reflective capacity, and you're spot on with that.
And the cycle is intended to be your reflective practice. So it is intentionally built that way. We don't want you to do 3 LENA recordings. It's important for the coach not to set the goal. So we have a goal of increasing our class score by 1 point. We're going to work on instructional support this week. This is the LENA device. That is not how the program is intended. And so we do, as a partnership agreement, kind of you sign up to use LENA to fidelity. So we want the teacher to make some of those practices. Now, then at the end of your 20 minutes or your 30 minutes of coaching, you can then tie it to, this is what it looks like in class, or this is what it looks like. I'm using family environmental rating scale 3. And so I will tie it to, this is the shared reading indicators or measurements in FACRS 3. Which talking tips do you think support these? And I've done some alignment with environmental rating scale in class to see where those fit in. But one of the challenges that some programs have had is when you have a very low talk classroom and some very high talk classrooms, because we know that personalities and skill level. And so I think it does need to come from above on making sure that we're looking at it from a strengths-based standpoint. What are some changes that might need to take place in the classroom? I'll pick on Florida and Texas, where our 2-year-old ratios are 1 to 11. And so the infant ratios are 1 to 4. And then in the toddler classrooms, it goes up to 1 to 5, but it makes a gigantic jump. So if they're following state ratios, it is not possible for a 2-year-old teacher to have the same outcomes, the same adult word count as it would be for an infant and toddler classroom in Texas specifically. In early Head Start, there's some standard. I have 2 sites. The Early Head Start has their standards. And so you really, as a coach, need to look at where are the strengths in that classroom and use reflective practice. And then if you are working directly with directors, it's an opportunity to say, maybe you can't lower ratios during all times of the day, but this seems to be a challenging time of the day. How can we add adult word counts with maybe a floater or those kind of things? So it gives, looking at practice from above.
Really this I know that's developmentally appropriate. Does LENA do any of that, or would that come from like goal or the education from the coach?
They have the grade out band on the individual child report.
Yeah. So we do have there's a band on the report, and we can, yeah. Does this work? So we do have bands. So we have what vocalization level is on average in home settings, on average in childcare settings, for adult word count, and then for conversational turns, and then as well as for some child vocalization. So they can see that. And then we also have some benchmark goals that we try to achieve. So we want to get as close to 90% to 100% of children at a minimum of 5 conversational turns per hour. So that's usually a pretty easy benchmark for programs to hit. And then the next benchmark is 15 or more turns per hour. And so we have a progress report that shows that after week 4, and we try to get them to 70%. And then at 25 turns or more per hour, we're trying to get at least 30% of the children to that point. And then with Lean It Grow 3.0, we're stretching a little further, and we have the stretch goal of 40 turns per hour, because we know that is. And you can kind of see it both as a classroom as a whole. And we know naturally there's going to be children who are more talkative than others. So that 15 turns per hour tends to be where we're really trying to focus right now. And we're pulling research and data to see what that looks like.
Yeah. So I got a couple I'll share with you. So when we first started, we were aiming for the average of 15 conversational turns per hour. And so here on the room summary report, this isn't moving with me, that 25, we were above, right? So that was our benchmark. As Lena mentioned, it's now kind of increased to 40. So we would be aiming for that. So on your room summary report, if you can shoot for that 40, I think that's a good benchmark to use. And then Colleen, can you go to the individual report for me, please? There. Okay, so on the individual tab report, I'm just not going to be taking my phone. This right, oh my gosh. This right here, where it says average hourly child vocalization. So you can see, and this says September 14th, September 21st. So these are the LENA days, right? How many that child had. Actually, if it's a live report, if you hover over the bar graph, it tells you the specific number of vocalizations that they had. And this large band here is typical range for preschool childcare environments. So that's, yes, this is home. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, great.
And then as the same with adult word count and then conversational turns, same bands. And then also on the classroom detail report, we have this similar bands, and there's a report on clear language and clear speech as well. Any other questions?
Pretty close. Yeah. So,
and I have materials if you want to see all the materials at the table. And then if you have any questions, and I left a sign up sheet, or you can come let me know. I would highly recommend the Why Do COVID Babies Talk Less. It's a great report, but we also have a lot of different online tools for you to access. And the 14 talking tips are available in 7 languages and can be downloaded and used with all of your programs at any point in time. You do not need to be using LENA. And we have some great parent-facing resources. This conversational turns research can also be downloaded and printed and shared with parents. We do know that just the more conversation, the better. And there's also some great social media things. So even if you're not necessarily specifically using LENA technology, please feel free to use the resources. And the talking tips are even in Mandarin and Arabic. And so there's some great diversity there for our talking tips. And both all the LENA programs, as far as are in English and Spanish, including our videos. So thank you so much. We appreciate it.